Well, it's a great honor and a pleasure to welcome to the show Mr. Ariel Pink. He is a indie musician of great renown and acclaim. How are you today, Ariel? And thank you for being on this program.
Thank you. Um, yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Mhm. I'm glad, and it's an honor. So I know that a couple of my friends listen to your music, and that's how I got in touch with your musical work. I think if I were to recommend Ariel Pink's music to a friend, I would probably start with it's unlike anything you've heard before. And I know that sites like Rolling Stone or Pitchfork would dispense some pretty $5 to $10 words to basically say the same thing. So
Right.
how would you describe the music that you are making or you have made?
Um, well, it's pretty difficult to say. I don't think I would be in that position, and I would be able to dodge the question if I was in the position. So I think that yeah, the idea is that that it doesn't really have too many um, references, but it's filled with references. It's supposed to be familiar. It's supposed to be uncanny. Um, a lot of it, I don't, I think is is uh, is really just a it's a mixture of things. It's a mixture of things. I think of it as a sort of a multimedia alternate reality. So, um, of course, I think that I get in the way of it, and I think that all the cult of personality about me actually kind of is unnecessary. And I if I had it my way, it would just be sort of like people would just go off of the artwork and the music to sort of uh, have make an impression, basically.
Mhm.
But of course, that's what I would have liked 20 years ago. But that's been blown open. So I'm kind of like the wizard behind everything, and it's just obviously it's a little underwhelming.
Yeah, this is a very cliched question, but do you ever expect that your special brand of music making would reach the ears of many people, including myself, who's in Vietnam?
Uh, no, and in fact, you're the first person from Vietnam that has uh, made themselves known. I've never played in Vietnam, so I would love to play Vietnam. Um, and I'm actually a very big fan of Vietnamese music too.
Oh,
So, what I've heard, and I was very um, into the when this is years ago, but there was the Alan Bishop project,
hmm.
the I think what was it called? It was called he had a bunch of he had a series of songs from Khmer
Oh,
and these compilations and of course Cambodian rocks and all that kind of stuff.
mhm.
So these are like psychedelic kind of free radio broadcasts from different eras, and they collected. And they're not. It's not a legal thing, but it's from yeah, it's from the yeah, I forget. It's something to do with Negative Land. I forget what the name of the project was again. Uh, it'll come to me. But yeah. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of all sorts of different types of music, and I did not expect that I would have a career from it, especially. And I definitely did not expect to have a 20-year long career at this point. So I feel very, very blessed.
Mhm. Yeah.
Arguably it's over, but
Yeah, of course, we can reach that question in a
at the
bit.
end.
Yeah. Um, So tell me about your upbringing. How is music play a role in that part of your life, your childhood?
Uh, well, I think like many people, I got into music as a fan, as a listener, and I didn't have any natural abilities or training or anything like that. So but luckily I was into music that from a young age that sort of that that was experimental in nature and was sounded like cacophony to most people. So that gave me a little bit of a spring in my step and gave me sort of the confidence that I could make a racket that would be worth something to somebody maybe somewhere at some time. And so I kept on doing that, and I did it really in a vacuum, and I didn't really have very many friends to share it with, and to sort of to buffer up my delusions of grandeur and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
I used to make tapes in high school, and just from very crude elements, and uh, but I sort of saw everything as being sort of this sort of the avant-garde classical thing. So it was a lot of hitting pots and pans, and in a very a very primitive nature, but I imbued it with the sort of a grandiosity that was only clear to me and not anybody else. And I used to annoy my friends with my tapes. I used to just go into the car and stick the cassette tape in the every time they saw me, and they learned to just put up with that aspect, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so I continued doing that for many years, and eventually I pretty much learned how to play instruments, guitar, bass, drums, keyboards. Um, I learned how to play those things and record at the same time. So my development sort of in all these aspects improved alongside each other.
Mhm.
So I have a very kind of a unique interplay with all these things when I use them, when I layer things on top of themselves. So that I think that that's my fingerprint, more or less, is just the groove, the melodies, and the production, and the whole presentation of the whole thing, which is my kind of like attitude, my face on everything, my spin on everything. And that's sort of like what has been uh my mark, which is not, it's just my mark, and it's just like anybody else has their mark, and it's nothing uh per se. uh I don't think it's as any more special or any less special than anybody else's thing.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
but it's funny that I feel very I don't feel like I have too many peers, although I feel like my my formula very very has been embraced and assimilated by culture in for years now, so it's almost passe, taken for granted.
Oh yeah.
And many people have even surpassed it, and they've done amazing things with it.
Mhm. Yeah. I can see that, there are certain like footprints of Ariel Pink's music in other more popular artists. I know that you worked with Miley Cyrus one time. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and I presume that's for her like weird 2015 album, right? Her Dead Pets. Is that the case?
Yes, I believe so. It was yes, for the one she did with the Flaming Lips. Yeah.
Yeah, Wayne Coyne and everything.
Hmm.
He's a great musical talent as well. Tell me about your parents. Are they musical people?
No, no, not at all.
Oh wow.
Nobody in my family is musical.
Mhm.
So I I think I started with um, sort of escapist fantasies, that I got into music as a sort of an escapist, a way to sort of get out of my life, uh, and to sort of sublimate the angst I had as a teenager, and uh, and that's how I expressed it. It was a little bit of a dysfunctional, um, uh, and sort of self-destructive thing, I think,
Mhm.
where I was trying to do something, do something that was my own, uh, invest myself in it, and come out the other end with some sort of declaration of myself at the end of it, and maybe I was trying to prove something to my parents, or to get their love or something like that. I think that's what it was. I've made peace with that part,
Oh, yeah.
since then. But yeah, it's been different things at different points, and now it's just it's more or less a it is probably in its twilight. I mean, I think of it. I think about these things as a professional now. So I'm 45 and 44 years old, and I do my thing, and I know how to do it, and I see myself as a sort of, an artist in working in the field.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I think that all the things we do, virtually all of them, are basically to get a reaction from our parents, whether it's a positive or a negative one. Um, I've had many musicians on this show, and I'm fascinated by how they come to be performing music. And there are some who do it because they come from a musical family background, and
Most of them, yeah.
yeah, but then there are the outliers, yourself included, where you have no musical background in your family heritage, and then you just come up with uh, your own
And
musical
then
style.
there's an aspect of it. There is, in many ways, my case is very serendipitous,
Mhm,
um, uh, because there really wasn't uh, any environment uh, that was welcoming for the music that I was making.
mhm.
So it was it was an act of, it was a foregone conclusion about whether I was going to be successful doing it. I mean, I didn't I started it with the express knowledge that there was no way that I would ever have a career in it. And that even if I mean, it was an act of defiance against the norms. It was not only was the music bad, uh, uh, but it was also, at best, if it had any appeal, it was so limited, because it was almost, it sounded passe. It was from a different, it was from a bygone era, and it was basically a rebellion from, it was a flight from modernism and from anything that was happening around me. And so for me, it carried it resonated for years as sort of just the sort of, like I said, nihilistic, self-destructive thing that was an escapist fantasy for me to sort of go into, where I sort of saw myself as, continuing this, having this private life with myself, uh, while doing other forms of work to make ends meet. Um, and I just didn't, in my mind, I was going to be a Henry Darger, where, like, I'm discovered after the fact, like some of these, like,
Mhm.
they find crates in my house or something like that, and you find out that, like, oh, he had this man had talent. He was a janitor for 40 years or 50
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
that,
like
that was what I was expecting would happen. And then, but as luck would have it, um there was a different there seemed to be a zeitgeist. I was much more plugged into a zeitgeist that was tied tied around I guess the internet, and also the fall of the music industry in the late 1990s, when
Mhm.
it basically when Napster came around, and
Yeah.
basically it took it walked itself off a cliff like overnight. And
Mhm.
so in the void, in the aftermath of that, the internet began to take over the reins of what we consider the music industry. So things like Pitchfork started to really be um, the main source of you know literate of journalism. Rolling Stones and paper magazines started to take their cues from online publications like Pitchfork. Uh, Pitchfork primarily, singularly, like like they were covering what those magazines were covering, but then they were also covering new artists and their own tastemakers, and so these were like sort of like there was an era when the internet could actually nurture its own rock stars, or its own heroes at the beginning, and so I think that I'm a part of that. I'm part of the It was a new medium, so there was a whole new kind of like there's a whole new way of like sort of like of seeing music and the history of music and the music industry. And so it just happened to be that I was at the right place in the right time. And at this time, bands like the Strokes
Mhm.
were bringing back guitars into the mainstream, quote unquote. So, and then there was the White Stripes right after them, and then there was Interpol, and as soon as that happened, then it was just like, oh my gosh, there's actually, I've been doing this for 8 years. I actually, I actually have a chance here. I've been, this might actually be, I might actually people might actually like it. They might actually have, I might have an audience for this. So and lo and behold, that's what happened. I I just gave my records to or gave my CDR copies to whoever I thought was worthy and who might like it.
Mhm.
And and I happened to give it to the Animal Collective one time when they were in town, um, just on a whim, and not expecting them to do anything with it, but I just kind of like just walked. I just got was in the habit of walking around with several copies of the things that I did, and made my own artwork, and then I just passed them off a copy, just to make an impression, and then they got back in touch with me about a month later and said that like they listened to it while they were on tour, and I thought that that was amazing. And they actually also happened to have a side label that they were starting, and they wanted to feature me, so I was like their flagship on that side label. So uh, all that was the first my first brush with reviews and the whole kind of thing. That sort of that was that was when I became a officially in a public entity in October of 2004. Before that, I was recording like crazy, and I had many different records. But I gave them a record also that I had recorded before any of the things that I had initially played them. So my career started kind of like very close to the beginning,
Mhm.
even though it was outdated, and it had been, I had, I had done many records since then. So, but the first impression that I made on the world was, after the fact, but it was essentially the first impression that, I would have made on the world if I been there to begin with. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it does. You are an outsider making music for outsiders like myself. I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear about your vast and eclectic musical influences, but let's talk about one first. R. Stevie Moore. Um, I guess if you can, how would you describe his music and how has he influenced you?
Oh well, I mean, I mean, I think I probably at the time, I think there's more people now that maybe could lay claim to it, but I was definitely the reigning. I listened to the most R. Stevie Moore music on the West Coast, than anybody else on the West Coast for sure. I mean, I was, I had a collection of about 75 of his records, um, in 2003, and I also happened to, and you get them at the time. For the most part, I got them from him. I made I sent him the doldrums. He sent him my record when I had done it, and he responded immediately. I set up my first email account, uh, a Hotmail account, um, just to receive a message from him about him receiving my package, which had an order for several of his tapes, as well as my CDR, my stuff, and a little description of who I was, and that was the first time I'd ever done that. I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't expect. I could have only dreamed of, like, I mean, I already held him in such high regard that I was very starstruck. And this is when I was 20 years old. So, but the way that he took to it immediately, and the things he said, it made me, I could have died right there, and I would have been so happy. And he's since then, he's been, you know, I call him my mentor. He's an influence, a father figure, and he's a trailblazer in my view. And I also feel like I'm the one who basically put him into the discussion. I mean, like the world. I was able to tell Wire magazine, Mojo magazine, and Uncut, and all these magazines that prided themselves on being sort of like these, sort of like, for rock aficionados, for people who just, like, go a little deeper with their music, and they think of themselves as sort of art tours, and real snobs about some music trivia and obscure stuff like that, and just the history of music, and I was able to tell them that they didn't know what they were talking about, that they haven't been doing their job. They've been, they consider themselves a good mag, but they haven't ever. This guy's been, been doing this stuff since the late '60s, and he has not been, he hasn't gotten one review in any of the, not one mention. I mean, they're mentioning people that had like one record in the '60s and the '70s, and that, got every issue after the fact on CD. But they meanwhile, there's R. Stevie Moore, who's Elvis Presley's bass player's son. I mean, he was born into a pedigree. I mean, he knew Roy Orbison. He grew up with Elvis and everybody around him all the time. I mean, his dad was like, the hot shot. He was the only one with a swimming pool in the school. He was also voted most likely to succeed. He was the school president. He was such a talent, and he managed to completely, uh, uh, just languish in obscurity, even though he was like the most versatile, the most the most undefinable. And I mean, he really just, to me, it was like when I discovered him, it was like, okay, this is like all roads just like lead here, and it's like a no brainer.
Mhm. Yeah, and of course you did an album with him. The title of that album is Ku Klux Glam, which I'm sure that you can totally get away with that today. Um, how did that feel? How was the recording process with your lifelong idol?
Oh, well, it was obviously great. It flew by way too quickly. He came and stayed with me for 2 weeks at my house, and we had been already by that point. We by that point we had worked together dozens of times. I mean, it was like 10 years after we had initially met. It was like, kind of like something that we always threatened to do at the very beginning. And he was also like, he was instrumental in getting me. He made my first website. He was kind of like he's kind of a nerd too. So he had his whole web world that he was very, very invested in. And he, I sent him materials, and he became my biggest champion, sponsor, from like slash promoter, everything. I mean, like I mean, I couldn't really be a jerk off after I met him. I mean, like any kind of pretensions about like becoming a rock star, throwing TVs out of hotel windows and all that kind of stuff, like the Rolling Stones. That was all dashed after I met him. He also was the picture of a gentleman and of a humble person in one regard. I mean, he's obviously got plenty of self obsession to go around, but but he deserves it. Some people don't deserve it. But but anyway, yeah, it felt great to work with him. If it were up to me, I would have spent more time on the things that like I contributed. But he's really restless, and so he took the reins and he sort of made it a record, whereas I would have probably like sat on it and tinkered with it for about a year, and it would have never come out probably. But people really like it. Yeah, I mean, I love it. I want to do it again. They have to do it again. We're talking about doing it this summer, but I guess that's not going to happen though.
Well, who knows? But I do hope that, the R. Stevie Moore and Ariel Pink collaboration album #2 would reach the public. Of course, again, given today's circumstances, that could be a bit more difficult, but again, that's my hopes. Um, so you've mentioned, that I know that most artists have an adversarial relationship with, their record label and the music industry as a whole. I've watched it, but as an outsider, I can't say I can comment on it too much. But I've long had problems with the music press, the outlets that you've mentioned, Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, Q, Mojo, and NME. It seems to me that, of course, that's the very left-wing politics that they adhere to, but increasingly I found that they have become increasingly snobbish. They champion, as long as it's a record that's made by a white dude in a tool shed and using some strange mixture of sounds. They would give it an instant was it best new release, but any other, then they just ignore. So
I think nowadays that probably wouldn't fly. Actually, I think that there would have to be a sort of a trans-binary, a non-binary a woman in her tool shed, I would say.
yeah.
That's I think that it used to be that. It used to be a very Anglo-centric, kind of like snobbish left-wing kind of thing for educated college educated white males, who are still deadbeats and living at their mom's house, or working at a record store. But I think that yeah, I mean, I think that that's now been replaced with the next generation of snobbery, which is sort of this new sort of like, I guess it's to be expected, when the temptation for power is very, very seductive, and when people that see themselves as oppressed and left out of the loop, when they get the chance to take over the reins, you can't blame them for hogging hogging the whole thing and being a snob and grandstanding about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm a fan of, indie music, the kind of weird, out there music like the kind that you're making. But nevertheless, being an Ariel Pink fan doesn't mean that you have to get along with other Ariel Pink fans, because I'm sure that they carry that same kind of snobbery. They think that listening to your music as well as, say, Animal Collective or some very
Well, I think it's
yeah, would make them better than other people. Um,
I think what if I were to define what I would I don't know my I can't really put a encapsulate what my fan base consists of. I don't know. It's as alien to me today as it was back then,
mhm.
and it's varied and it changes all the time. So, um, people that were fans aren't anymore. There's different. There's always new audiences. That's the only way I've been able to do it. Has been not relying on the diehards or the people that basically are typically you would expect to be into me back in the day. A lot of those people have, when I sold out to Miley Cyrus, they booked it. They didn't want to see me succeed.
Oh,
They didn't
yeah.
want to see me get popular, because I think it was a personal relationship that they had with me, and they felt like they were like in on like a secret, and they sort of want to hold that close to them. And I know what that feels like, because I feel the same way about my influences. I mean, part of me doesn't even want to talk about our Stevie Wonder, not because I don't love him, but because he's like my secret. He's a good thing. You don't want to corrupt a good thing by sharing it with everybody, because they're gonna ruin it, literally. And like anything that's like good is, you want to keep it. You don't want to tell anybody about it, because you want to keep it special. You want to keep it pure and good. You don't want it to be pulverized and imitated and become, and turn into this fashion statement that basically makes it so that you can't even listen to it ever again at a certain point. Like I feel that way about the Velvet Underground, for instance. You know, or I mean, there's countless examples of things that you just, as good as they are, they've had their moment, and that you can't really, they've been played out. And so that's kind of like the catch-22 with things that are good. I think is that you don't want, you want to protect and almost kind of preserve something that's like great, and keep it somewhat close. You don't want to share it with the world so recklessly. You want to kind of give it to the right people. You want to kind of save it for the, there's that impulse. It's a kind of it's almost like the Dead Sea Scrolls or something like that, or like the Holy Grail. It needs to be passed down with care and with some degree of pretension, I suppose.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but I think that the idea of the archetypical Ariel Pink listener is really that these are people that they're not snobs per se. They're just alienated people. I think they're all individuals, and they all, like me, feel very, very personal with their music, and so it's part of their identity. So I think that that's who it speaks to. But then it also speaks to other people now, because it speaks to people that are just going to prom or having a good time and on the beach, and it's just like what the friends that the people that they're hanging out with listen to, and it's just taken for granted as being sort of like the popular thing, which was why it was so easy for them to discard me so quickly and without even thinking about it,
Yeah.
because they didn't really have that sort of that attachment. And that's what happens when you're too disposable, and you're too when you don't really when you don't really when you don't really preserve things in society or in culture, when you don't, I mean, this is like a, a ship that's going down, right now. You have to remember that. We have to, it feels like it's always on the horizon. It's never here, but it's really going down. And we know that. And it's been, ever since I've been alive, that's been the case.
Mhm. Yeah, I know that, to use the religious allegory, I know that Jesus only shared that he's the son of God to 12 people, and the Old Testament God. And I don't know if you remember much about your Judaism upbringing, but he the Old Testament God only shared his commandments to a small group of people, the Hebrews. So there's that. But nevertheless, I'm very put off by whenever a fan says of an artist that they have sold out to. I can certainly understand how, when a musical figure is met with money and status and such, and they dilute the original essence of their music so that it sounds more
Right.
mainstream or corporatized. But I don't think you should be against a previously impoverished musical musician suddenly making a steady living of himself.
Well, obviously, it's you would think that that would be the case, but I think that like there's a lot of other things tied up in it when people are just basically lost in their own lives and they're envious of even people that like are just barely they're still renting an apartment, they don't own anything, but they have a career, they're making money, they have a job. When you're 20 years old, when you're looking out into the landscape and you don't know how to even do that, and there doesn't seem to be too many inroads. It seems rather hopeless. So you tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You really resent anybody who's got anything going, and I think that that's what happens in revolutions. I mean, like they're youth based revolutions because they just basically it's the people that like have worked hard and have done stuff and have gotten where they are, and the people that like haven't lived long enough to really like have anything for themselves yet, so they're not going to respect the things that like the person that's worked very hard to get what he has. And they're not going to, they're going to look on it with resentful eyes, and I think that in many ways people think of me as being more successful than I actually am. They don't realize that like just because they know about me and because I've been in their living rent free in their mind for the past 15 years, it does not mean that I by any means a robbing the bank and successful. I mean, I've been, i'm I'm a blue collar worker. I mean, I don't own a home. I'm absolutely not killing it, but that's another thing is that like I sort of I don't have anything wrong. I don't have anything against becoming successful. I just don't think that it's in my case. I just never tried. Given that, I was happy. I was always happy just doing enough to basically to make it possible for me to do it continuously. So that was my. I don't have very much overhead, and it wasn't very difficult to do that as a single male in the United States at the turn of the century, with you know the GDP as it was, and I mean like with all the factors basically like like conflate confluence of things.
Mhm.
So, but I don't think that's obviously not the same thing anymore, and so I think that there is a sense of people really want to like I guess this just generation, this woke generation, for lack of a better term, is really they're really evening the score. They're really trying to bring about the new the new paradigm. They're trying to bring it all down. I think in the U.S. it's sort of just been like, sort of like we've held out for longer than any other country, and basically grown a little bit. We've atrophied a little bit in terms of national confidence. So we're due for a revolution or like an invasion, which we're not going to get. It's going to come from the inside. It's like it's basically just it's idleness and a sense of futility, I think. But every other country is sort of like, has had these. They've all had revolutions that in within the past 100 years. I mean, that makes us old by today's standards. We just managed to not be invaded or demolished or have a or kill ourselves in the process in the Civil War. So since the Civil War, so I think that's we've reaped all the benefits of that, but the like the Roman Empire, it just basically like it sticks around too long and it dies of malaise. It just basically sputters out because it doesn't believe in itself anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, well,
So
it's well, it's a great segue to bring in the elephant in the room, which is your politics. Um, I know that you've professed your support for Donald Trump, and I know that mm, a great many people who supported Trump also supported Bernie Sanders and vice versa. If they voted for Trump in 2016, they would vote for Sanders in 2020 and so on.
right,
And of course, I think they are two sides of the same coin in that they both believe, and so are much of their greatest, their base, that there's something that the country is not living up to the standards that it has give itself, where people are not given especially the young, and the working class are not given enough opportunities to get ahead in life. And
well, I, I think that might be more the Bernie side, I would say. But one thing that I think both sides could agree on is that the the thing that we both agree on is that like the particular people and the particular regime that's in Washington right now, what we know is like the the swamp or the elites, the Clintons, the Gates, the people that basically like, the people that are in power and have been in power now for about 30 years. That's not supposed to happen. Our system of governance is designed to have to be molting constantly so that nobody really has the power for very long. And they managed to kind of entrench themselves in DC. Like the Clintons are perfect examples. Clinton got impeached by the end. I mean, it may as well have never happened. But as far as I'm concerned, they should have left DC and gone and had a very successful book tour and had lived happily ever after. Doing whatever they do, but outside of DC. But that's not the way it worked out. It's like they not only did they restaff everybody in DC, those people stick around and they became just basically they just became they were not elected. They were basically put there and they stayed there throughout the subsequent administrations to the point where it was basically obviously like a sort of like a cartel or something like that, like some sort of like a group of people that basically entrenched themselves in politics for their own power, and they never were ever planning on giving it up, even though we had free elections, and even though these things are basically there to actually kind of to ensure that nobody gets the power for very long.
Mhm.
And so I think that we can both agree on that the governance was being ruined. Okay, like the laws that as we see them, what we see the role of government in the United States, had already been kind of like corrupted and not been, had been overthrown basically, and it had been overthrown for a while now. And I think that like the gears of democracy were working just enough to actually create a situation where a Donald Trump could actually win an election, and that was something that I believe that they weren't expecting. I mean, they certainly didn't make it seem like they expected it, and they still are seem to be extremely determined to never let it happen again. So that what we have now is like a is sort of like there it's almost out in the open. It's almost like they're barricaded there. And these are my, I mean, my politics are, I'm not even a political person. I never voted before. I would have been, I'm not conspiratorial or anything like that. I have a surface read of things. And what I saw was when he campaigned in 2015, I saw the entire media, the media apparatus completely in lockstep with itself for the first time in trying to smear this guy, one person. There was no kind of like, playing, giving him the benefit of the doubt, sort of like, it was a unified, it was the first time that basically it was out in the open that the Democratic Party, and I mean the Republican Party too, because that's just controlled oppositions, Democratic Party basically, or they're both the same thing. The Republican Party doesn't have any power though, so that's the way that the Democrats have designed it. It's just their fake opposition to make them look good in election season. Some suit comes out that's on the Republican side that's got no charm whatsoever, and they come out with a saxophone. Okay, and then everybody loves it. That it's just there to make people believe that there's like that there's competition that they can, but it's really just controlled, and they keep the Republicans very weak for that reason. They don't want any competition. They don't want anybody like encroaching on their power, and that's been their tactic for as long as the Clintons have been around. So it makes leaving the Republicans in this state of weakness makes it appealing for somebody like a Trump to come in on a Republican ticket, because he won't get any opposition. There's no power in his party to stop him from doing that, and he doesn't even have to be really a Republican. He's just a personality. So that's Republicans, if they do get voted in based on their personality, on the force of the character primarily. And I mean, even with Reagan, that was the case. He was an actor. So what I'm saying is that what I saw was basically that the media was basically just an arm of the government doing propaganda. And I would have never known this. I would have given them the benefit of the doubt throughout all their mistakes, all the past, the WMDs, all the blunders. I would have never woken up to it. They would have slow boiled me right along with everybody else, and we wouldn't have had any. We wouldn't have known the difference. We wouldn't have known the difference at all if it hadn't been for Donald Trump coming in and seeing this campaign of hatred for one person before they even had any chance to prove themselves. And it's still like, I mean, they still think that he's like a danger to the planet or the world. It's like he already was in office. He didn't destroy the world. He didn't usher in a nuclear winter. He didn't do any of the things that they were fearing that he would do. But they act like he's literally the most hated person. I mean, he's worse than Hitler. So that all that stuff makes me think that like they don't know what they're talking about. It makes them look bad. When somebody hates somebody and somebody picks on somebody, I don't care how good it is, how warranted it is. It's not a good look. You kind of don't believe the people anymore. You're like, if you really hate somebody that much, like why are you just leave it alone, you know? Makes me think that like maybe like there's maybe he's not as bad as you fucking as they say that he is. And I think that maybe that's really what it comes down to is he's not as bad as they are. And I personally believe that that's been proven to be the case time and time again.
I see. Well, of course, the purpose of me having this conversation with you is, well, one, to explore your music and as well how you feel about it, and secondly, I hope to give you a fair hearing on your political views, and because again, like many who are still your fans, I was outraged by what has happened to you since you profess your political beliefs. Um, but nevertheless, it to give an impression that, and I myself do not agree with the entirety of your monologue earlier. Um, I can certainly understand it, and I hope that I do hope to quarrel with it a bit because I dislike Trump, even though I'm a conservative, a political conservative. But I wouldn't fall for the, I guess, never Trump type, those who think that everything that he does is the worst thing in the world, because I have to grant that he has done some pretty good things during the 4 years of his presidency.
You're
Um,
already that's why we're talking, man. I honestly like I have to. I listened to your Alan Dershowitz interview,
oh, okay, that's nice.
and I got and I get interviews I get offers for interviews all the time, and I was I was pleasantly just I heard your perspective was absolutely even-handed and fair, and so I which is so bizarre and refreshing. So I felt comfortable enough to actually come on here and broach these topics with you specifically because you obviously have a you care about things a little bit more than we're used to, and that's so refreshing. And I have to just I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass, but I'm just saying, uh, you've obviously like you're not going to be totally pro Trump if you're a conservative, if you're a true conservative, because he's a very populist president, and he's far too moderate, and and he doesn't really like he does not he's a lousy version of a conservative person by all means, and he's not religious and enough, and doesn't he's a little bit too he's been on the fence a little bit for a long time, so I can understand those criticisms. But I mean if you were in this climate in my country, you would be you would be they would call you a Nazi. They would call you they have made a campaign through the media, through the various medias. I mean, like Newsweek, Time Magazine, in 2016, 17, these magazines. I mean, this is like all of the mainstream media. They all came out and tried to and basically told everybody in plain sight that you have to cut off your conservative friends. You cannot be friends with your Republican friends. We cannot abide by this anymore. Cut out everybody. They expressly told people this is if you study history on any level, you know what this is leading to. This is Khmer Rouge language. This is Iranian Revolution language. This is this is Nazi stuff. This is totalitarian stuff. This is Maoist, and we know where it goes. We know where it goes. It's basically drawing the line and making people. They call you racist. They call you a Nazi. They call me all these things. These are my friends. I don't know any conservatives. I'm the most liberal person that I know. I mean, I'm honestly like I'm not a saint. I'm not I'm not terrible, but like I mean I'm saying like I mean I was born and raised in California. I have these values. I don't know anything else. I was not raised religiously. Um, so I have the same values as everybody else here to a point though. I mean what's really distinguishing me from everybody else at this point is the level of intellectual honesty or something because I'm willing to like I'm willing to get everybody can have their own opinion and I'm no I could be wrong about everything that I think I don't think that like I'm right about it. It just I automatically like like my career I just assumed that I was wrong. I assume that I'm wrong about politics. I don't know enough about it. I'm completely naive.
Mhm.
That said, it's never been a make or break issue with anybody that I've ever met because all the people that I know are apolitical types, and basically, they don't, everybody there's a sort of we take it for granted. Of course it's rigged. Of course it's but of course it's a bunch of it's a swamp filled with corrupt and lizards, and all that kind of stuff. That's been everybody's always said that, and they it's almost kind of like they want it to be true. They want it to be true. I think what Trump's getting elected is proof of is that it wasn't what they thought it was. They thought they had it in the bag. There's no way that he can win because they're saying it. They would never let it happen because it's rigged. And what they didn't anticipate happening is that like it's not rigged. Every vote counts. Everything, all the forces that were at play to sort of like it's a republic here. This country voted him in because they didn't want Hillary, even though Hillary had it in the bag in her mind, and she could pull out all sorts of stuff and never get questioned by it. That she just basically like got got arrogant. They completely she wasn't in touch with the feeling on the street in America. She didn't, and neither were any of the networks, and neither were any of the corporate the sort of the upper class corporate branding of the whole thing. They basically did not. They were too afraid to say anything against Hillary Clinton for because they didn't want to piss off their HR boards. I mean you can't go against a woman.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that like there's an ideology here that just has really jumped the shark, and it's beyond politics. It's like a very like I think social media has a lot to do with it. This has been a very very successful control mechanism and a weapon to basically ensnare not just the United States but everybody everywhere around the planet as we can see with COVID. Um, for the first time ever, everybody's getting the news simultaneously, and it's being mediated through the same mechanism. It's just too centralized. I mean, I think what's made us survive all this time is just that we're stupid. That we haven't been able to figure out how to kill everybody. Only I don't know. I mean, it's like, I'm not going to say that. Don't take that part out. I'm not trying to kill anybody. I'm just saying. I mean, what I'm saying is that like what we had going for us, what's made the world go round, is what we don't know about ourselves, what we haven't been able to control, and we're fine tuning that, and that's the price. The it's a really the stakes are a lot higher now, and we know for a fact that they're in the wrong hands. So what do you do then? What do you do? You vote. In my case, I say you vote for the loser at all times. You don't vote for the winner.
Yeah. Again, without dragging this again, this is the
I'm not
purpose.
trying to convince you or anything. Sorry.
No, it's all right. But yeah. Well, first, I'm very grateful that you've taken the time to listen to the show. I know that, like you, Professor Dershowitz is a remarkable man who, again, I've had many disagreements with, but I'm very sympathetic to the fact that he has been basically canceled and pilloried by his own side for his views on the Donald. And I wouldn't want any of our listeners to get the impression that I am in total agreement with what you've said, and the purpose of me is only to give you a fair hearing. But again, without turning this into a political debate, I would simply add that mm, in the past 30 or so years of US politics, and I guess, I guess I have the benefit of being an outsider to your country to give this perspective. Um, there have not been a president that I'm sure that president since Clinton to could be Clinton um, were very capable people, very intelligent people, but they have lost the popular conscious. They did not know how to resonate with the average man slash woman. Um, you hear that cliche about how Donald Trump is someone you can have a beer with, and I think in some extent he is. Um, but he has no, but he's not a capable man of capable governor. He's not capable of political philosophy or economics or foreign policy, which are three of the fields in U.S. politics that I'm most concerned about. Meanwhile, Hillary, even though she is deeply unpopular, I dislike her a lot, is capable of those things, even though her ideas of reforming the country economically or politically or in foreign policy wise, I would find much to quarrel with. Um, of course, this is not to say that I would vote for Hillary if she runs again, but uh, this is what I'm saying. I understand why people vote for Trump. That is because what you call the establishment has been filled to the brim with highly educated people who have little to no regard for those who are not as educated by them. I'm from Vietnam, so I've been recently reading a book that, again, the title of the book is Dereliction of Duty by H.R. McMaster. He is a retired US Army general, and he recently served on Trump's cabinet. He laid out the idea that Kennedy, when he assembled a group of very smart Harvard graduates, including one Robert McNamara, to do
Mhm.
what the military is supposed to do, which is strategy planning and all that. The intellectuals, the Harvard educated people, they all failed at that. And so there's a danger to letting intellectuals have all the power. And
Absolutely.
that's
I mean,
what,
I think
yeah.
what's been, I see, I kind of think that like what makes the U.S. strong and sort of robust against what's kept us sort of like sort of immune from imploding or having or keeping us in a two-party system, basically, basically like duking it out between them, basically, like
Mhm.
without one side getting all the power. That's really why it's a two-party system. Is only just that is just one has to be there. One's there, and then there's another one that's there just to keep the ambitions of the other one in check. That's the only reason. It has nothing to do with any kind of specific policy or attitude that either one is espousing. Those can flip, and those are fluid. They can be trade even across. Like one can represent. That one side could be pro-abortion, and then 4 years later they could be the other. It doesn't matter. None of the details matter. It's a two-party system simply because there needs to be one party. There's one party necessarily that's going to be there, and they're going to have the lion's share of the power. They're going to have the power, and they're going to make sure they're going to look after themselves in that capacity. The introduction of the republic is to really just serve as a sort of like a check, like where we got like an ambition just as strong as you, and you're not going to get away with doing everything your way. So you don't get to have your single party. So and little by little, I think that like, they found ways around this, obviously, and both parties probably mean very little in terms of what I think that their function was supposed to be to begin with. Like, I mean, I think that, like, for instance, like, you know, the idea that that uh, people in office and in the seat of presidency have to have some sort of skill set, that, like some sort of the diplomatic know-how and all that kind of stuff. I think that that's just ornamental. I mean, that's just a fancy. That's just people that look like they can sell you a good car, and they basically are good salesmen. That's essentially what it is. You want a good poster boy. Okay, but really what it is that, like, you don't really need any of those things. You need some of those things, but there's an X factor. We don't know. People vote in all sorts of different types of people for different reasons, and they don't. The key point being that, like, they have a limited knowledge of what they're stepping into when they step into it. There's no kind of preparation for you when you step into the White House for the first time. You take over. You look at the book of what you're dealing with for the first time. I mean, that's your baby. You're a baby. You don't know what you have until you're in that seat, and you're like, oh my god, that's what they did. That's what I have to figure out. I mean, that's basically going to. That's when you learn what your job is for the first time, and you don't know it. There's no preparation for that. I mean, it's just a kind of like, getting like, like people like jump around and become CEOs of different companies. They're just traded out. I mean, it's just like they don't even care, but they don't really. There's no longevity expected there. They're just basically like little, like, stool pigeons claiming something for like some other entity that's basically bigger than them, and they're basically and that's where the capture happens. But what I'm saying is that, like, I think that, like, what's more intelligent than any kind of real intelligent, any kind of like diplomatic sense, even internationally or anything like that, but I think is more important, and what makes us smarter, stronger, is 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 the fact that we don't know what we're doing. That you could have somebody that's basically does not know what they're doing. You're having a baby in the control centers. That's like somebody that, like Putin, for instance, who's been in power for 40 years. That would imbue him with a lot more um, an advantage, basically, to basically see U.S. at work over time, and how to, like, basically like navigate it, because everybody that steps in steps out after 8 years at most. But he's got a good overview of it because he's been uniquely poised to basically like to take that knowledge and basically, like, keep his power. So, and work around it. The reality is that, like, there's no way to outsmart a baby, because it basically that's the smartest argument. You can't win an argument with a baby. It could go crazy. It can do crazy things. So you have to basically, there's no way to really outsmart the baby in any kind of legitimate way. And I think that that's really where, U.S. politics really serves as the id of the American public, and it's sort of like it represents the sort of like weird, we don't really know what our country represents to ourselves. We don't have a very solid sense of it. It's a becoming. We have amnesia for anything that wasn't, that was prior to this 4 years ago. We don't really ever grapple with any of the things that we've done 20 or 30 years ago. We see those being we see that as being an era that was fought by other people, by other actors, not ourselves. We don't see ourselves as being responsible, and in a sense we're not, because we're left out of it completely. Like, the government does all its bidding on behalf of the American people, doesn't tell them, doesn't consult them for their approval or anything really. They just sort of manufacture their consent for the most part to make them think that they have some sort of control. Seems like that's the case, but I don't think that that's supposed to be the case. I think that it's supposed to be like actually, just when it comes to elections, people vote who they want in there, and sometimes it's it's an authoritarian, sometimes it's an asshole, sometimes it's a dummy, sometimes it's a nice guy. These all have repercussions that ripple out far beyond beyond their, like, their short term due date. I mean, like every decision that any president makes is going to have massively negative consequences in the long term, beyond what they can understand and hope to like gauge. There's nothing good in the short term that they can do that won't actually like ripple out in the long term, in the macro, and be some sort of like seismic shift down the line. So it's there's a big decision, like who you put in office. I mean, it's a monumental, grave thing, and I think people need to. I just think they need to realize that, like, I mean, they voted for this guy Biden, who might be the best president ever, by the way. He might be the best one ever. We just don't know it yet. But the point is that, like, I've never thought that that I would that politics would ever be something that would actually divide friendships, that would split families, and like kind of split people against each other on every level. I mean, I didn't realize that, like, people were that malleable. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I guess I didn't realize that I underestimated the level of groupthink that was basically that was at play. I definitely thought it was not going to happen to my friends. I did not expect that it would work on them so quickly overnight, and they would basically flinch and never be heard from again. I mean, the people that I've known, members of my family too, it's unbelievable. And I mean, this is just because, like, the media is the primary mechanism of steering opinion of anything in this country.
Yeah. The definition of totalitarianism is that everything is seen in a political lens, so that everything has to be political. So
And everyone has to be, everyone, it
and
becomes a
everyone
part of
too,
it.
yeah.
Everyone
Uh,
becomes a part of it.
and so ever since I developed my, I guess, political views, I've always been afraid of that phrase, the personal is political. And I I would stay away from anyone who really believes that, because they are the totalitarian wannabes and such. But going back to music for a bit, I'm sure that this has been a very entertaining discussion. But I know that this is ever since I've developed my political views again. I've discovered that many, if not most, of the musicians who I listen to and I really enjoy have abhorrent political views, those that I do not like at all. I'm sure yours is an exception, even though I would find disagreeable things in it. And for an industry, the music, especially the indie music scene, which rewards musical unorthodoxy, heterodoxy, it it yeah, it places a very punitive cost on political heterodoxy. I mean, every single indie musician that I know uh, is some ways a left-wing progressive Bernie.
Not just that,
Yeah,
not just in the indie world. We're talking about the entertainment world,
yeah.
Hollywood as well. Okay, so Hollywood, sports, anything that can be at its most mainstream, it's still it's still the most easy. It's the sort of like the ground zero for where basically things are going to percolate out in terms of like the ideologies that like people are going to like sort of like adopt in mass, somewhere else in the country. If they're, they might not feel it in the office in Nebraska, but in Hollywood and in the entertainment industry in general, and of course in the indie world as well, because it's basically a parcel of that. It's just like one little piece of that.
Mhm.
it's going it's completely I'm more or less an anachronism, and I'm famous now because I was the only person in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry, that was vocally pro-Trump for 4 years. If there was other people that were pro-Trump, they stayed quiet about it. And so that's what I'm famous for. That's what I'm known for, is because for the first time ever, everybody got the memo. They knew that they couldn't say that, and not risk their teams, the livelihoods of their families, their bandmates' lives, their managers, and their the label, all the things. Since I don't have that stuff, it was easy for me to basically just stay the line, and I've always been able to sort of say what I want. That's me taking the temperature on how healthy our nation is. I think as long as I can say whatever I want, I can speak out of my ass one day. I can be honest. I can be sarcastic. It's never really gotten me that much in trouble. I mean, I'm not worried about. I've been able to say all sorts of things and get different degrees of canceled in the past, and actually kind of use it to my advantage. But this is a wholly different thing. This is a take you out. They are silencing the other point of view. They're actively suppressing it, and it's they don't want you to see it anywhere. They don't want you to see the truth. They don't want you to see the truth is illegal now online. It's the only thing that's illegal, or that you can't say. You can't ask about COVID. Oh, well, why can't we ask about COVID? Why can't we question, what they're saying about it when it comes out? It's like, oh, we know that that's a bad thing. Why can't we question it? Well, they're just going to tell us that we can't question it because they've already made the decision for us. That's what we're going to do. How can that be a good thing? How can that be a good thing? We know that it can't be a good thing because it's the only thing that we can't question. Why can't we question it? And then we act surprised when, after 2 years of being in lockdowns and the devastation that's caused worldwide, we can understand. We see exactly what we feared was happening right from the start. And I think that it's becoming more and more obvious by the day that the United States was the impetus, was the ground zero for this pangolin in a Wuhan market. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is we know that these things are basically they're not. This wasn't a Chinese virus. This was a collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I'm very skeptical about that particular narrative. But still, Professor Dershowitz, as well as many other people who are still paying attention, say that the specter of Joseph McCarthy has reared its ugly head again. This is, McCarthy, in the cause of battling communism, which I find is a just cause, has also battling liberalism, the value that make your country great. So that made him a demagogue and a bully. And so McCarthyism is basically defined as criminalizing dissent, disagreement. And so, again, despite the fact that I don't like Trump, I don't agree with Trump supporters. I don't really agree with those who question, COVID or vaccines. They go a bit too far for me. But nevertheless, I would agree with their skepticism of the legal measures taken to combat the virus by the governments that are prominent today.
Well. So, but if you can agree with them on that point, why is it so difficult to agree with them on the other points? Because they all flow from that. Do you understand? There's I wasn't a vaccine skeptic. I don't have any I've gotten vaccinated for all sorts of other things. That was never a problem. I would have always told people to get vaccinated. I mean, like I would have always encouraged them. Not anymore, though. I can't do that anymore. You know why? Because of them. Because they made everybody take. Because they pretty much have closed off the world to anybody who hasn't gotten vaccinated. And you want to tell me that the science is there? No way. It's not even scientific. It's not scientific anymore. There's no, where's the scientific method in that? Where is it in the marriage of politics? Where is it? Where? It can't be science. And I mean, and it can't be for a good end either. It can't be for a good end. Government should, sorry. So
that's fine. Again, it's fine to question it. Again, I draw my line that I question the vaccine mandates, but I don't question the vaccine itself. And I know that, and I think I would still encourage people to get their shots unless they've had COVID and they develop an immune response to it. And again,
I haven't gotten COVID. I haven't gotten COVID.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you're keeping it healthy. Um, but yeah, it's the pandemic, and that is a consequence of that is more far-reaching than the actual pandemic disease itself, the COVID-19, which is that um, the the science, the people who claim to know the science, you have your American man, Dr. Fauci, who I do not think is a scientist at all, but a government stooge, has abused people's trust in
Absolutely.
the scientific process itself.
He's destroyed it. He's absolutely destroyed it.
And
Absolutely.
so when the next pandemic hits, we would be very skeptical, even distrustful of those who claim to know the answer. And I fear that that will definitely happen, and the consequences will be devastating. Yeah.
What about? I mean. Let me ask you this, okay? Not to go down the rabbit hole, but I mean, you've been paying attention, obviously, to Bill Gates for years, right? I mean, he's been around. I mean, I remember his appearance on the scene in the '90s, like it was yesterday. Okay, it's like it's still the same life. It's not like he's like he like disappeared and came back, and that like we haven't known this. Okay, I remember clearly in the '90s his whole he was responsible for sort of just when Bill met Bill, they sort of orchestrated the sort of this the pitch for the internet and for this wonderful communication breakthrough and the potential with that. And as a corollary, I mean, like he had this side hobby that was just happened to be climate science, which is just sort of a fringe kind of thing. But he sort of brought it to the Democratic Party, and more or less gave them this sort of kind of this sort of scientific kind of consensus, but it was really hardly that. It was more of an activist special interest that had sort of began in the 70s at some point, and had its detractors from the beginning, but basically and also as it went along, they had people that was shedding scientific I mean basically the idea that there could be any kind of a consensus about it is still hotly debated, I would say, but that's less the point. It was a hobby of his, nothing to do with, he's not a scientist himself. No. He's not even a computer programmer per se. I mean, he basically so these are fields that he has no real knowledge of, and what he was talking about back in the day was population reduction, that we had to prepare ourselves for by 2020 2030, if we did not reduce the population, if we did not bring down the global temperature, the sea level, the sea level rising, blah blah blah. If we basically did not handle this right away, it was going to be an apocalypse, and we basically needed to reduce the population because we were growing too fast, and that was this is all sort of like in under the idea that we need to reduce carbon emissions. We need to bring down population so that we have less cars, less pollution, all these things basically. Okay, these things that's what he was saying we needed to do. Now, he wasn't calling for a genocide or for anything like that. But when you hear that, Fauci and pharma and these vaccines are being touted as being life-saving, and that they're going to save lives, as many lives as possible, and the person behind that campaign is the same person that's saying that we need to reduce the population by half or more. What if these vaccines actually saved everybody's life? What would happen then? What would happen at that point? How that would be a snag in his plans to reduce the population in half. What I'm saying is, I wouldn't trust the guy that basically said we need to reduce the population of the world to be to be the one that's sort of behind the vaccines being effective. I just that to me, it seems like a conflict of interest, and it seems like it's I don't know how he can reconcile those things in any kind of logical way, and I don't think he's really called on it or questioned about it enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he should. Gates is not Gates is not an expert on climate science at all, and I don't think I take any of his views on how to fix this world seriously. Um, I think despite I still think that climate change is a thing, and I think it's something that we should be concerned about.
Sure.
But these climate so-called experts, there's Al Gore among them, who have bought into a very Malthusian idea, Thomas Malthus, about how population growth is going to bring about the end of the earth. And there's always an apocalyptic strain to climate science, at least. And another problem is that they have not made it resonating to those of us who do not know.
They haven't improved anything.
Nope.
They haven't improved anything, even though, but what they have managed to do is to push it to the forefront and make it sort of like supersede everything else. Guys, we can govern later. Donald Trump, you can do your thing later. We have an emergency now that we need. It's a way to basically get in front of any kind of real. It's a way to sort of to overthrow or overhaul, to push something into the foreground as if it's the most pressing issue and needs to be solved immediately, or else all hell is going to break loose and the sky is going to fall. That is a tactic in war. That's a way to basically cheat the game. It's a way to gain power by using the weakness of both players supposedly acting in good faith with each other to be just and fair. And it's basically just it's being disingenuous in every kind of way and forcing the issue in front, making it making it these the emergency measures. We have all these these policies now that were signed into that were signed in by various, I think by Obama, where in emergency situations, the government of the United States is given an allowance to basically take over the state media and to basically engage in propaganda, like it says it in the policy proposals. So it's these things are have been planned and have been have been created for that purpose, and there almost seems to be no accident. They seem to be manufactured, lots of manufactured, lots of very convenient uh, 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 events that basically set the precedent and make open the door for all sorts of new rearranging, getting around policies that have been like long held to be givens and sort of liberties that we have as Americans. And I think that the internet, in a big way, is just a giant black market where basically, like, it gets around every vendor, the business regulations. It's basically it's a giant black market where basically now it's too big to fail. I mean, it's everybody's got their foot in it, and it's a little bit too late to like back out of it. There's no backing out of it. There's no kind of like going back to paper receipts. But it was a way. It was given away. It was sold to everybody. Almost kind of given everybody got a free sample. Everybody got to experience it, and it was sold on the promise of sort of taking power away from the state. You can get your media from different sources. You can use your own judgment and all this kind of stuff. That was all just basically, that was the cheese. That was just like the cheese on the outer layer. That was just to get our foot in the bear trap. And now that everybody's in it, they're just taking off the gloves, it seems. And it's just like they don't even have to pretend like they have our best interest in mind. They're just basically, they've already tightened the screws, and they can be bolder about it because they know that we're all trapped now, and we're all stuck in it. And I'm telling you, I mean, these are the same people that are in power right now. They never left. So it's not like this is like kind of like a coincidence. I think that these people are desperate and going for broke. They will never cede their power. They will never let another fair election happen, because they know what happened. If they were to like leave power, they have to answer for everything they've done, not just in the past 5 years, in the past 30 years. I mean, how many wars have we gotten into? I mean, even 50 years. I mean, like we've never had to really like atone for any of the things that we've done, whereas every other country, gets a reprimand, and it gets highly, is basically learns their lesson, becomes a socialist country in the aftermath, and basically is defanged, so to speak. They're not going to do that kind of the same thing again. They're not going to invade another country, or like throw their whole legislature overboard by radicals. And I mean that happens. It does happen, and then we either help them or we don't. but I'm saying that the Americans have if it was a mistake, if these were all accidents, I would be still a patriotic American. I would be, and I am. And I believe that the United States is so important in the world. That's really what it comes down to. I think it deserves to be there. But my hunch is that everything that like liberals seem to be concerned about is supersedes nationality, national interests, and they want to solve everything everywhere all the time. And that to me is one of the most dangerous things for the United States, for the ongoing existence of the United States, and for its role in creating opportunity for the rest of the world. I mean, this is like the escape hatch. You can come here and you can change your destiny. I think that's a very important thing. That's my my speech. Sorry.
Yeah. I would allow me to perhaps temper your pessimism just a little bit, without completely changing your mind. Yeah.
Oh, I would love that.
two things. Again, I would say that the key to absolving someone of pessimism is not really optimism, because that's the last thing they want to hear, but at least some understanding and balance might help. Um, so I will start with, the pandemic happened, and you know how before the pandemic there are people like Greta Thunberg and everyone who's keep clamoring for us to reduce our fossil fuel carbon emissions and such. The pandemic happened.
Right.
Carbon fossil fuel emissions are obviously reduced since there's no industry going on anymore, and people lose their jobs and stay home. So, you would think that Greta Thunberg would be happy, but she's not. And there's at the outset of the pandemic, I see people posting memes about how nature is healing and the earth is healing. Meanwhile, people are dying of COVID and people are losing their jobs and kids are locked in their homes and everyone is locked in their homes. So I cannot say that, the planet is healing more. Secondly, there's a great essay by William James that was written at the turn of the 20th century, which really resonates with what we're dealing with today. It's called The Moral Equivalent of War, and he basically argues that in times of war, you see everything, society, industry, the economy, mobilize for one single purpose: the war effort, basically. And this was written before World War One.
Right.
So James, he is what you would call a classical progressive. He would argue that these things, uh, this kind of mobilization where everyone is focused on one single cause, should be applied to things other than war itself. Namely, maybe a progressive cause or public spending or any anything that the president or the government deems a right cause. And so 100 years or so later, the moral equivalent of war argument is still being applied by those who love to administer our lives. And that is how that argument persists today. If you're a reading person, that would be a great essay to check out.
Yeah, I am. Thanks.
That's good. That's good. In terms of, I know that many of those who supported Trump also believe in the idea that your country, America, is going on a steep decline. And one of the most famous example is an essay called The Flight 93 Election by Michael Anton, which, I read it and I dislike it immensely because I'm not convinced by the myth of America's decline. Because when you spend some time in a country that is other than America, you see that one, if you manage to accelerate America's decline, that will be the country that you end up with. Maybe not, the worst example of totalitarianism, i.e., Soviet Union, but a country where your freedom is heavily curtailed. But
Right.
ironically enough, those who are the most ardent believer in, again, the myth of America's decline are those who are accelerating it. So I wouldn't want you to be, part of that process. Like the first line in the Godfather movie, I believe in America. I I especially believe in a strong U.S. of A. because our country borders China, and I wouldn't want anyone else, any of the other contenders, to be leader of the free world or just the world without the free. So, so despite that,
Right.
I think that America is going through pretty rough times. Its politics is in critical condition. Its society is heavily divided. But I'm sure that its principles of freedom are an inspiration to those of us abroad, especially the people of Hong Kong who are suffering from Chinese oppression. So I would say that you still have a lot going on for your country, and it's
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's not it's not anywhere near as hopeless as maybe I'm making it seem, but it's one of the things that like there is a there is a there is a national there seems to be some sort of like a spiritual void, okay, in I wonder how many people in Washington D.C. really love the country, and like like I think that that should be like a requirement,
Mhm.
it when being a president. No president that hates the country should take power. I mean, in my opinion, I mean that should be a requirement. But nobody really ever has ever taken the task to really explain that or qualify that. I mean, I'm sure Biden would basically say how great this country is for all sorts of fake reasons
Mhm.
that I think that like what he says and what they do are totally different things. And I think that like there might be some sort of there might be like, for instance, like the freedoms that we do enjoy in this country. We do enjoy them, but those things are not the idea that like that that the press could be so egregiously just lying and smearing its adversaries and completely deplatforming them. That stuff is like that's from another country, from another time, and there's no excuse for it. There's no reason why Donald Trump needs to be deplatformed. He didn't do anything to deserve that. There's no reason why Ariel Pink needs to be deplatformed and shunned and thrown, made a pariah in the music world, uh, and not able to attend concerts and venues in his own hometown overnight because the media lied about him and said that he was at an event that he wasn't at. Okay, uh, there's just countless examples of this now, and it's completely off the rails. There's no there's no accountability for it. There's no a way to address it. Alex Jones, is a a very divisive figure, but and I've never say what you will about what his theories are and if they I mean yeah he's a quack, he's a quack. There's lots of quacks out there, we all know them. uh he's allowed to be a quack. He's allowed to sell his snake oil to people that basically want to buy it. I would never stop anybody from being able to do that. That's what makes the American dream what it is, because it's all snake oil, if you ask me. Most of it. It's just different brands of it. Um, so the idea that like he doesn't get to actually do that anymore, and that he gets deplatformed for his message of crazy, which is not like it's not advocating for violence. He's not a violent person. I'm not a violent person, and Trump is not a hateful person like he's made out to be. 90% of the time, he speaks very. He's like a boss at a job. He speaks freely. He's got a coarse way about him. Does not, if you want to imbue meaning into his statements that that are basically off the record, and like Richard Nixon, you know, we can thank Richard Nixon for being as paranoid for recording all of his thing. I mean, I mean, like we really, if he hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have caught him, and we wouldn't have hung him.
Mhm.
I think Richard Nixon is one of the most honorable men because he stepped down.
Mhm.
He did it with grace. I mean, that's just shows character. But obviously, I don't think that actually he's. I think that like him being prone to hyperbole is was taken to mean a lot more than it made to be a bigger thing than it necessarily should have been. Not saying that there's not that there's not some shred of truth there too. I'm just saying that like the punishments don't fit the crime, and
Right.
to be super self-righteous about these things, and to be mercilessly unforgiving about them, and to really to make it to stain somebody's entire uh, legacy and output is extremely un-American, extremely unhuman. And I mean, I think that like everybody should be able to like redeem themselves and should be given that opportunity. And if you know, Alex Jones is one of these people that like said something about Sandy Hook because he was skeptical that it happened. He got bad intel. He said it out loud. Since he's a media pundit or whatever, these families are able to sue him for the lie of defamation, and they just and he's already apologized. He said he was sorry. He's but there's no amount of they will never let him live it down. They will never let him live it down. He's the worst person ever. He needs to be silenced. He needs to be railroaded. He's a national enemy. These you can't tell me that the same people that are concocting these narratives in their mind and fighting for them online every day as people, you can't tell me that these people are in any kind of have any kind of good sense of any kind of moral integrity or have any kind of idea. These people should not be wagging their finger about accountability and consequences. These people are just they're just hungry for blood. And I can forgive them because they've been sort of like they've been sort of been muzzled and like kept in a cage, and like they've been foaming at the mouth to sort of like get something, get somebody, have somebody take somebody down, and I guess that I fall into that, and Trump falls into that, and that's satisfying some sort of like some very uh, 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 reasonable impetus. This It's feeding some impulse in them that needs to be fed, but it's not right. It's not wise. It's not mature, and it's damaging. It's really bad. I think that 20-year-olds deciding what words we can use on YouTube is a disaster. I've been a free person. I've been able to say what I've wanted to say in interviews for 20 years. The idea that like I can't I have to work around these algorithmic bots to not say certain words, not say certain concepts because people younger than me have taken a liking to basically like being the Gestapo and the police and censoring everything on the internet for everybody, not just for children. In the past, it was just for children. This is like we didn't ban books. We didn't do any of these. We didn't ban words. We didn't do any of these things when I was alive. I was alive at a good to see the America at its height. And it's if this is the trajectory we're going in, I'm prepared to be just completely snuffed out and basically be thrown out with yesterday's bathwater. It's a new world. I get it. I'm a boomer. I've got boomer fucking values. I understand that. I understand that. Like I'm a has been. I'm just saying, there's no sustainability to use their language. Okay, there's no sustainability in having words entering words into an algorithm and having robots roving the internet, policing speech. You can only wait. How can you? Where are you going to go with that? That's not longevity for your platform. That's not longevity for anything. They're not going to you're not going to be able to like magically say these words again at some point in the future. Okay, this is a one-way trajectory down, and it's the opposite of sustainability. It's a recipe for destruction. I mean, how else can I put it? I mean, it's just these are things that like I think aren't articulated very well by scholars. And I mean, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but it's just I feel like I don't see enough of it. I don't see a sensible enough just just a philosophical argument for this stuff in lay terms. I just people just don't understand the experts on this topic are they're over my head, and I think over a lot of people's heads, and maybe over their own heads. I don't think that they know what they necessarily are talking about either. So I trust myself in all of this. I'm not a friend to the Republican Party any more than I'm a friend to the Democratic Party. I'm just an individual. I mean, nobody, I didn't march on the Capitol, so that doesn't ingratiate me to the election skeptics and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they said that I was there, but I wasn't there, so I didn't really honorably stand with them.
Mhm.
So I'm not exactly I'm not exactly like the poster boy for Republicans on any level. So I'm a bit dispossessed in my own, and just one of a few kind of like outliers out there that I know that have any kind of reach or voice or that kind of thing. So
I see. You know, again, I may not be a musician or a very successful, very gifted one, but I've read enough political philosophy to know that I know that every president in the U.S. would state that they love America and they would believe
oh,
it.
you're cutting out.
Oh yeah. So
Are you there?
yeah, yeah, I'm
It's
here.
it's kind of freezing up a little bit.
Okay.
Shoot, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Hello.
So as I was saying before we get erupted, so I know that again, every president in America would say that they love the country that they are leading, and they would sincerely believe it, most of them. But there are those who believe who do not love the things that make your country great, namely its liberties and freedoms, and they tend to adhere to a more utopian framework that they, with their ideas, can somehow transcend, can make the country better. And the first among them is Woodrow Wilson, who explicitly reject the ideas that the Federalists have created. And
Yeah.
but and these people whom have made you into a pariah, I believe, are the same ones who
Venerated me, who actually made me what I am. They embraced me. They are the liberals that basically that gave rise to me. I mean that I'm the product. I was born in California. I am the as West Coast as it gets,
Mhm.
and that's where I think that's a good thing. That when I say that I'm a boomer, I'm not a boomer. I just it's a joke because they call me that, like, as an insult on Twitter, but I'm happy to be one, because ultimately it's not so off the mark. My basically my whole philosophical and political sensibility, or whatever you want to call it, or my attitude is, it basically begins and ends in the 60s. Okay, like, I mean, like, it's basically like I never really, I'm like a teenager, like my parents as a teen when they were teenagers. That's about as far as my moral compass basically like allows me to go. I never got in with recycling, never got in with all these other kind of things that basically like have happened since then. Arguably they were the ones who did those things as well. But my entire that's I pretty much stop at the 60s, and that's because I really I just took that message in and ate it and took it and absorbed it hook, line, and sinker. So a lot of the many of the things, the developments that have happened since then, although I've been ignorant of the workings and political, sort of like, complexity and sort of mystery of it all. I mean, like, I don't know how those things, you know, how the components work together necessarily, but I have a better idea, now, and as I get older. Um, but but a lot of the things that, like, I believe, like, were true back then are still true. um, with like, added sort of like exceptions to the rule, basically, like a more kind of like there's more authority, there's more time for rules to basically be imposed and sort of like uh, uh, sort of stuff the Pandora's box that was opened up in the 60s, which really was, I mean, like we had, like you said, there was McCarthy, or there was censorship back then. There was the Hollywood purge, the Hollywood ban of communists and all that kind of stuff that happened out here. But those things pretty much ended, and I feel like they should have had a definitive end around the time of the 60s. I mean, there's lots of things that were wrong with the 60s. Obviously, like all that hedonism and all that kind of stuff, and all that the drugs and all that, the degeneracy, was bound to be bad on some level as well. But I think the spirit of it, I've maintained is something that's worth defending, because I don't I think that the liberals were the ones that really took up the mantle for freedom of speech and stuff like that, and they really, to me, like, I mean, I'm just a child of that. Like, there's that episode of the Twilight Zone where the guy's in front of the court and he's like, state your occupation, and he's like, I'm a librarian, and then like the judge is like, oh, you're obsolete. He's like you're an anachronism. You shouldn't even be here. Like, like, well, what are you doing selling books? How dare you sell books? You are a buffoon. You are an insect. You are a scourge on humanity. And this is just like a librarian that was just basically, he was in front of the judge, like ready to serve a sentence, and the crime of preserving these books was what he was being. It was a very, very poignant episode, and I still think that it's important. I don't think that anything should be banned, and I think that the internet needs to be what it sort of started as, which is just a very, there's a lot of fucking bad shit on there. The majority of it is bad, but we're in, to police it now is to override our our national liberties in service of a bigger nation, basically, that we're all sort of agreeing to be a part of.
Yeah.
I mean, the internet is, if it's its own country, we are all basically at its mercy, and it seems like it's taken over. I mean, there's no vendors that can, like, there's no businesses that can operate without it now.
Mm-hmm.
So all of our legalese and all that kind of stuff, all the precedent that we've set for states to basically decide these things for for various things, are being completely basically exterminated by a black market that basically has questionable people, or imaginary forces that are basically running the show, and pulling the levers there. So it's a very, very weird thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like, we need to, like, tread carefully and realize that, like, if it really is a world wide web, we can't afford to turn it into a police zone.
Yeah, it's staggering to me because those, the number of people who have made the internet great. Again, Bill Gates is one of them. The other is Mark Zuckerberg, and everyone who's in the Silicon Valley types. Maybe except for Elon or Peter Thiel. They've all bought into this very utopian notion of what the world should be, and therefore they find that they can dispense with liberties, and that I find is very alarming. And And
national, they don't have national interests at heart is what it comes down to. They don't their ambitions are
and that
beyond.
too, that
Their
too.
ambitions are beyond.
Too. And I don't think we should be governed by those who do not value our freedoms. Of course, there's the liberal imagination is always divided by the idea that there is something better and we can reach to, and the idea that people have their freedoms and we should respect them because we are all very imperfect creatures. And that's the whole idea of what freedom should be. But today's liberals, if we can call them that, buy solely into the idea of progress and do not have enough respect for freedoms.
It seems to me that progress, that change, this whole this sort of romanticization of change being, inevitable, and that, like, this sort of like this sort of romanticizing the idea that, that this we that it's the only thing that you can count on, and that, like, that's like this the only thing in the universe that's sort of like, that is that you can rely on with complete certainty is the change. And to make that a virtue in and of itself, to me, is a terrible spiritual error. Like, I mean, I think that, like, for me, it's like you change is something is your enemy. Change is your enemy. Like, change is like, you don't want to venerate it. You don't want to make it. You don't want to praise change. You don't want to encourage it along. You want to conserve things that are. It's an inevitable thing, but it's your enemy. It's like, if you could stand still and let the winds of time basically like whisk you away while you stood still and you didn't expend one iota of energy, you would still corrode away eventually, and that's the only thing that I think can combat change is the human spirit. And that's what makes us unique, is because we can actually kind of like withstand the forces that are working on us constantly. And but we have to basically, we have to appreciate what we have. We have to basically not like just want to change everything and get all Dalai Lama about it, and just be completely cool with fucking, like, not being attached to anything. I think that that's just a very, very convenient outlook. I think that we have to take into consideration that there's things that, like, that we set about creating in the world, and we want to preserve it. And if you love something, you should hold on to it for dear life, for as long as you can, because it'll be wrenched away from you. And I mean that as much for the past and for memories as I do for property, and for anything, for laws, and for your friendships, everything. I think you should appreciate those things and covet those things while you have them, because they're going to go away. And so you don't need to encourage it along. And I think that progress in the United States is sort of like, is just it's a catch-all for people that basically where hope is the only thing that they live for. When we all know that, like, there's not much to look forward to. I mean, I guess for, like, for a teenager, yeah, there's plenty to look forward to, hopefully, but they can't see it. For me, it's like the best is behind me. There is no hope. There's only, I mean, what am I going to, like, what do I have to look forward to? Death. We all have that to look forward to. It's a sad bug in the program. Like, I mean, we get wiser, we have more knowledge as time goes on. Yet we have this inevitable thing that happens. Our bodies decay. There's nothing to look forward to. All the best years are behind us. All the hope that we have is because we experienced the joy, and we are upset that we were wrenched away from it at some point, and we basically find different things to sort of lash out at and blame that. like I think that we experienced paradise when we were very, very young, and we experienced love from our families, and we were in paradise. and then it lets us down, and we blame our parents for that disappointment, as if it could ever be the same. And do you have kids?
No, I'm still, I'm a kid. I'm still living with my parents at the moment, but yeah. But
Oh,
I
how
know
old are
you
you?
are. 23. I'm turning 23 in 2 months.
You're not a kid, but I mean, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, I'm a kid too. At a certain point, you know, I think that, like, the sort of the teenage rebellion. I don't know if that's a thing in the rest of the world as much as it
Oh
is in the United
yes.
States.
Oh yes.
Yes. Okay. So there's a real. I would think it would be, because it was just, just to, I don't know. I'm in. I got into Freud, so I guess I'm a little bit biased, but there's lots of problems with his stuff. But I think that, like, what it comes down to is that, like, I think that all the sort of hypervigilance that we see in playing out in youth revolts, and in people that basically want to overthrow the system, or Antifa, or stop the greed, and the corporate oligarchs and all that kind of stuff. I
Mhm.
think that, I think that, like, that hypervigilance and that drive is proof that they had love when they were younger, because they have agency. They're not, like, they know how they can walk up to a counter, and they can ask for their sandwich or the cigarettes, and that's at some point they were given the necessary love that's necessary to cultivate that sense of self. And I think that that's the echo of it, is that is the sense of self. That's what your parents love, that parent, that comfort that they give you when you're very young. I'm talking about, like, when the first year. um you never are able to equal that that bliss later on in life. And I think that come down makes us basically want to look to the future for hope. And so we want to be re, re we want to be reunited with that glory that we actually already experienced once before, way early on. We got a glimpse of it, paradise, and we hold out for hope that we will reunite it. That it might come later if we tear down these obstacles, but it's never going to happen. It's a fool's. It's not there. It's and if you the lesson is really that you need to basically appreciate the now, because this is the best moment of the rest of your life. The idea of hope being something that you can sort of, like, rest your laurels on, is, to me, is wrong. Like, I think that, like, I mean, there could be good things, but I think that, like, all the good is behind us. And I don't care how terrible your childhood was. There's there's an innocence there. There's all the deceit of all your dreams and hopes that, like, basically, like, you've outgrown, and all that kind of stuff. Like, all that stuff is, like, that's what we want to reunite with. But that's what will never happen. And my idea, in many ways, is to freeze frame the past. My musical world and my whole exploration is completely has been the same since I started. I mean, it's just I want to literally freeze frame my earliest experiences with music, and never and sort of just preserve them, preserve the wonder of, like, listening to music and not knowing how it was made, and, like, what was going on when I was young, like, just like being completely disoriented by it. And I wanted to displace the experience of listening to music to where, I wanted to have people thinking that they were listening to something from another era. Like, and that was a very disorienting thing, I think, for people when I first started, was this sense that, like, you didn't know when it was made, and there was just a kind of a weird uncanniness to it. So, and that was all intentional. It wasn't meant to be a part of the zeitgeist, but my whole thing has been sort of been a maybe an attempt in vain to basically like preserve the past in any way possible against the forces of change that are basically just ripping through us every moment. So it's probably a good place to end this interview, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Unless you have more questions or whatever.
Well, we've passed hour number two, and I think I think I should probably land this plane. But you know, I think many of the things you've spoken about, politically, again, it's I maintain some skepticism towards it, and I would encourage anyone listening to take it with a grain of
Of
salt.
course.
But
Yeah.
the why, the reason why you're saying all this, the reason why you have this view would, I think, would provide our listeners and viewers with an insight into your creative process. And what you've said earlier, I would recommend that you seek out an essay called "On Being Conservative" by Michael Oakeshott. He's a great British philosopher who is not well known enough even in the world of philosophy. And he basically says what you've been saying, but I guess with better prose. Uh, how
Yeah.
how the conservative disposition is neither utopian as the liberals are now being, or dystopian as the most of the Trumpers, namely Michael Anton, have been professing. But it's a method of how he basically says that you love something because it is transient, because it can go away, because you cannot have unlimited time with it. I mean, most people
Yeah.
love life because they're not going to experience it forever, the same way that you would love your wife or your kids or
Yep.
the person or thing that's close to you. I like the music of Ariel Pink, for example, because I understand that he will probably one day stop making music, and I hope that
And
day comes.
CDs will be rendered redundant, and there won't be any means of actually listening to it again. I wish
Yeah,
they would actually appreciate that part.
yeah, yeah, and I hope that day when you hang up the mic or the soundboard comes later than sooner. And
Right.
but nevertheless, Michael Oakeshott's essay on being conservative is a great reading, where he basically takes that premise and uh, expand on it. Um, Again, I'm very glad that we are having this conversation. Some people pay hundreds of dollars to meet their favorite musician, via VIP tickets, and I get to do this virtually without expense. But I do regret that we've come this far without mentioning your latest musical project with your with your new band. Sorry. So perhaps we can end on that.
Oh no, there's I I think that it's for me, it's not like really a new project, and it's not. I'm not here to do. I'm not trying to pitch or like do a plug or anything like that. I'm over that stuff now. I don't. I mean, I will do it hopefully again, in time, but in a sense, I really don't think that it's a very good time to make art, and I really think that it's when things are being censored, when you can't say certain things,
Mhm.
that's when you can't say those things. Yeah, you shouldn't be making art at this point. I don't know why anybody would at this point. They should be boycotting it until they basically they stop this authoritarian uh, pattern that they've started up. They need to basically stop. The kids need to stop. the kids, not the adults. The kids need to stop. Okay, there's an authoritarian then in younger generations because they grew up with the internet, and they have there's an impulse to police and control things that they understand innately, that I think my generation doesn't really, the chaos of the world and the sort of like the outliers and the sort of like the chance occurrence of freedom sort of like actually kind of just predisposed us to appreciate certain certain question marks and certain and to just sort of suspend judgment about certain things, not be so dogmatic about things, and be a little bit, leave it open for interpretation, leave yourself open to maybe being like, changing your mind later on. You might actually not feel the way that you do in 5 years. I certainly haven't felt the way that I feel right now, so I can just tell you that people are going to change, and you cannot make a control system that basically is resisting change. You can do it in the right way. There's certain things that should be preserved, and to the degree that they actually kind of like preserve the movements and the thought processes of people and their ability to express themselves, that is something that I think it's the First Amendment for a reason. All of the other ones come after that. You can't just throw the First Amendment out the window and keep the rest. You can't throw Jesus out of the Bible and keep the rest. It's what we've done though, and it's a recipe for obsolescence. It's just like it's like we don't even care. We're going to be exactly what was. I mean, it's all coming. It's I mean, even the apostles were, even the prophets were right. The saints and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it seems to all be. I mean, I'm not trying to be pessimistic here. I think that it's a fascinating conundrum, but I don't think that nobody wants the world to end, even if they are a Branch Davidian and a complete doomsday prophet. I think everybody. I think that the people in the past that sort of the Christian, the Crusaders, and the people that basically WikiLeaked the whole Christ thing to everybody in the world. They changed the time, the date, to be centered around Christ, so that we wouldn't forget about him. And that's what we are. I mean, the further that we go away from it, the further that, it's 2022. I mean, what happened 2022 years ago? Did time start? No, we just, but that's what it's there for. It's there marking the time so that we can actually never forget it. And we need to, and all of history that we know of so far has basically happened in that time, and we've been cataloging it. And that's why we keep on cataloging it, because things happen in time now. And I think that that's an example of something that we might not want to throw away and do a year zero kind of thing, like they did it in Vietnam.
Cambodia, sorry, not our country, but our
Cambodia. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. But I think that's a lot of these things, people aren't even thinking about, but I see them. If you have any kind of experience with the world, I can see things from a perspective that other people can't, because I have foresight now and I have experience, and people that are younger don't necessarily know that they have to make their mistakes and they have to learn these things. But I can see with absolute clarity where things are going, and I can see that there's a wall that we're headed for, very, very apparently, and nobody's where nobody's the drivers are getting pissed off because the backseat drivers are complaining about it, telling them to slow down, but they're not listening. So I would caution that people not just basically not write off things that sound is nonsensical and ridiculous and irrational and crazy, right out, because truth is stranger than fiction, and we have no idea I mean, I wasn't prepared for what happened. I never thought this would happen in my lifetime. Uh, it was, but it's happening, and we're all reacclimating to it, and it wasn't exactly an organic change, but it's but certain things aren't. And so if this is the way of the world now, then I guess I'm going to probably die on my feet in probably counter to the changes that are taking place. I'm not going to probably be very warm to them. I'll probably I'll probably be like dying on my feet, probably believing in this stuff. I probably won't lie. I'll probably die for this. I'll probably, if there's a gun to my head, I might begging me to change my mind and not be a Trump supporter or whatever. I I probably won't listen to that person.
Mhm. Yes, you do have a point in saying that most new art these days are not really pieces of art, but statements. So it's statements.
They can't be. They can't. They're saying nothing. They can't say anything that matters
Yeah.
because it's outlawed. The truth is outlawed. So they are only pieces of art insofar as they basically don't do nothing to basically advance us in any kind of way. And that's a climate that I wouldn't encourage anybody to make art in. I would even encourage you to write. With the pace that we're going, they're going to tell you to they're going to restrict our speech, and you're only going to be able to like say, you're going to have like a quota of of words that you can speak in a given month, just to bring down your carbon footprint. I mean, I think that like this is the way that we're going. I mean honestly, like that's it's not it's not absurd. They come up with more absurd reasons for taking away people's rights egregiously now, and completely out in the open, and with everybody's okay, um, without any means for the people that basically don't believe where we're going. That have the people that are dissenting, they don't have a chance. And so there's a very very a firm hand that's trying to stamp them out of existence, and trying to basically be merciless with its power. And this is why it's more important than ever to to uh, uh, actually fight for things that basically are wrong, and to have let people think the wrong things. You need to basically allow people to do those things, to think things that are completely ridiculous and wrong, and you need to defend them like they're real. It's not about being right. I mean, people don't vote so that they can vote for the winner. I think that you need to vote so that you can, at least to vote for the loser if you want, without having to get punished for it. The punishment should be that, like, I'm the loser. That should be punishment enough, right? But no, it's not punishment enough. Since I voted for the loser, I deserve to be completely ostracized in my life, in my livelihood. I need to turn into into a cartoon of a villain. That is unacceptable. I don't know where people where they got this idea. Where did this come from? This is unprecedented in my lifetime. I've never seen anything like this. It's only 5 years. It's been less than 5 years, I'd say, but it's really been 1.5 years, and it feels like eternity. It feels like purgatory. I'm still in denial that like this is the new normal, because it just seems like it was brought about by total campaign of propaganda and mind control that has really, really just just got everybody super, in lockstep with each other with some sort of totalitarian a way that they believe that the world is going to go. And I think that it's just, um, let's let people fucking have different opinions. Let's let people just be dissenting for the sake of dissenting. They don't even have to believe it. We need that. We need that, especially in a totalitarian system. We can't afford to have everybody against people that like have different opinions. That's where things get fucking scary with totalitarianism, you know? I mean, it's not like there's a dictatorship out there.
No, it doesn't have to be a sole dictator. It may have to be a small minority of people, a very vocal small minority of people, or even the majority of people who basically bullies and cajoles the minority into doing its bidding.
But in that case, with the dictator, yeah, if everybody knows that there's a dictator on, that will, that they have to basically stay quiet about, that it's speaking code, and they're basically, like that's like what you had in
Mhm.
Stalin era Russia. Everybody knew that it was a joke. I mean, that the whole thing was that they were not free, and that they basically had to like keep quiet, or else, they basically like didn't dissent, but they found ways of communicating with each other the truth throughout all that, because they knew that that there was a big bully on the scene, and that they basically had to just mind their P's and Q's and do what was necessary in order to survive. And they wouldn't encourage people to like dissent in that environment, but they would understand, there would be an understanding between people that like they basically knew the truth between them, and it was just a matter of time before that thing was going to get toppled. What you don't want, that's not totalitarianism, that's a dictatorship. And then you have totalitarianism is different. It's when everybody's caught up in the same hypnosis, basically, of in the myth of whatever it is. Either it could be a leader, or there could be like an ideology, whatever it is, but basically you have everybody, including the leader, in or majority, basically completely like convinced of their infallibility, and exercising it on other subjects with total impunity. And so, in that situation, you definitely you need to have dissenting voices to, or else it'll decay. Like if there's just if everybody decides to stamp out dissent in that environment, where basically there's a totalitarian thing, that's when things get really ugly, and people start to act immoral, and they devolve into doing worse and worse things, almost unthinkingly, and one after the other, because they haven't been reminded of the value of life. They need to know that there's that we are free thinkers, that we have thoughts, that it's that we came here, we got here not to do this. We didn't come this far to actually to stifle thought, to basically try to get the genie back in the bottle, and to police each other. We didn't do that. We didn't create the internet for world domination, and capture, and to control people, and to give our fate over to an AI that knows more than we do, since we don't believe in God. These are all just basically like basic things. I mean, why would you want to do that? Why would anybody?
Dictatorships have existed since the beginning of history, but totalitarian regimes are a relatively new phenomenon in the 20th century.
Right.
The difference is that in a dictatorship, the dictator have the power, but in a totalitarian nation state, is a set of ideas, and the rest of the population are caught up with. And of course, dissenters who dissent with that set of ideas are being pilloried. Well, but I do worry about the creeping totalitarianism that is going on in Western society, and it is if I fear totalitarianism in every country, but I do fear the most when it reaches the United States, where freedom is born. So if that becomes a reality, then that is a very sad reality to live in indeed. But
I
never,
would agree with you.
nevertheless, I would close this fascinating discussion of ours by saying that I hope that by doing this, by having enough people paying attention to our discussion, as well as perhaps pick up your latest album. I would just say the name as well. Was it The Key to Joyous
Eve
Disobedience
Joy's Disobedience.
by Ariel Pink's Dark Side? I do hope that it may provide enough steps to bring you out of the belly of the beast that is your cancellation hell. I know that many, no, not too many, but enough people have came out of cancellation being stronger than ever. Kanye West was one example, and I think Dave Chappelle is doing that. I mean, he's
I
now,
think
yeah,
there is a sense that if you sensing pure anxiety in me, I think you're missing the point. I mean, I do have a nervous disposition, and I don't want to worry people or even come across as a whiny, woe is me kind of thing. But I actually feel very optimistic
okay,
that
that's good.
it will turn around and it's but I say that as a as a caution to those who would think otherwise, because it can only be that. I mean, I'm not you they haven't neutralized me, they haven't neutralized anybody. You can't silence people. It's like you try to do that and you will fail miserably. You will learn the hard way that you shouldn't do that. And everybody wants to talk about accountability these days, but they really haven't really had any experience being accountable for what they do, and they don't know the first thing about it. So it's something a little bit. They just learned a language that's sort of been fashionably uh, uh, popularized for them, and they seem to to want to use it on those who actually might be in a better position to uh, to judge it. So I think that's a mistake that that will actually be very very. I think it'll be a rude awakening when the consequences for what's happening right now on a mass scale, including but not just limited to politics, U.S. politics. I mean, social policing and stuff like that. I think that there's a an alienation in humans right now, and but I think that there's a glorious chance too. This is a lot of people. I don't think that I've ever been as popular as I am at this moment. So and believe me, there's a when people do know the difference and they can see what they can parcel bullshit from uh, from from fact. I do believe that the truth will will win in some sort of sense. I think that I do have that. I'm counting on that. I'm counting on that, and I think that it's that sort of that's the conservatism of truth. The sort of the one thing that can actually outsmart the winds of change uh, by human intervention. In other words, so and I don't think any AI is going to overtake us in that sense at all. So I think that's more of a fantasy land, science fiction. That's just me.
Yeah. I do hope for, the second coming of Ariel Pink, where, he's making music and thriving in the musical landscape again, where of course you can quote LL Cool J and say, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. But for now, let's just wrap it up there. And I thank you very much.
I would like to tour again. Like
Yeah, of course.
It'd be great to tour again, and I think it'll happen. I think it'll be a comeback. It'll have to be a comeback.
Yeah. Well, until then, stay strong. Take care of yourself.
You're freezing up again.
Oh no.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Well, we're beginning to
Take care,
wrap up.
guys.
Yeah. Take care of yourself and stay strong.
Okay.
And thank you very much.
Okay, you too. Thank you.